Okay. Hi, everyone. So thanks for joining us today. We have another webinar treat for us in the series. So this is the second in the series. So we did one about a month or so ago with ITC talking about WeChat Work and sort of how it can be used, some different scenarios, particularly for office automation. This time we're going to focus, we talked a little bit about retail last time, but this time we're going to dig much deeper into how it can be used for retail. And one quick note for everyone, and we'll remind everyone later as well, is that the slides you're going to be seeing today are sort of a simplified version. We have a longer form white paper that's available for download that you can download as well later. So today, to give a quick overview, we'll be talking about, actually, let's go to, well, you've seen us. We'll quickly start the introductions with Aurelien.
Yep.
And I'm Aaron Chang. And so we're going to do an introduction in a minute, and I'm going to go to some slides so that I remember what I'm saying. And this is not the right slide. So, okay, we're talking about WeChat Work strategies for retail digital transformation today. So, quick introductions here. I'm Aaron Chang. I'm the CEO and founder of JINGDigital. And so my background, I've been in China since 2006. Started out in marketing a long time ago in New York. And then we did IT outsourcing. And then in 2014, we launched JingSocial. And so we work with hundreds of brands. JINGDigital now has a number of products. And then we help brands fundamentally turn fans into customers. So we also have here together with us is, wow. We have Aurelien. Why don't you introduce yourself?
Yeah, so Aurelien, I studied along with my brother IT Consultis 8 years ago. We have a team of 80 people spread across Asia Pacific. So basically we build all the technology that are helping brands being successful, including, like mini program, e-commerce, in-store experiences, APPs, and all those kind of things, including data and, like social CRM. And we've been working extensively with Jing along the year using their amazing product.
Yeah, so that's the reason we're doing this together, is that it's a great partnership because they build a lot of the great challenging custom tools that brands need, because every industry has really specific needs. We're a SaaS platform, so we provide a technology that's usable for a lot of industries, but every industry has specific needs, and we're going to be talking about a bunch of those today. Today we're going to have really three sections. We're going to start out with an overall WeChat Work introduction. Many of us are familiar with WeChat Work, might even be using it already at your company, but a lot of us still haven't or are just getting familiar with it. So for all of us, it's a good refresher. We're going to talk, Aurelien's going to take us through WeChat Work, the ecosystem, what it's about. And then we're going to jump into specific detailed strategies for what we're seeing brands using WeChat Work for and what they're starting to launch now in terms of three key strategies: how do we acquire customers better, how do we sell online, and then clienteling, how do we provide better experiences. And finally, we'll talk about sort of the nuts and bolts of how can you potentially get started with a new program like this. It's a new channel, it's a new opportunity. How do you sell this and get this started inside of your company and organization? A quick, background about, why we're even so excited about WeChat Work. So I've been talking about and developed some tools for O2O. I mean, O2O was a big topic, say, about 4 or 5 years ago, online to offline or online to offline. It is now actually becoming reality in a lot of different ways. And one of the most interesting ways is because of WeChat Work, because WeChat itself, as we know, has become hugely popular because of fundamentally private chat. This communication model has turned out to be much more easy to use and much more friendly than most other digital communication networks or methods. And so what we now know is that the fact is that we all use it for ourselves for business. So even though it's personal WeChat, we've now combined both of our business and our personal life together in the same place. And probably, I would say, almost all of my important business interactions with partners and customers actually happens on WeChat these days. If it happens over email, it's sort of a formal announcement of some type, usually. So, and that's what customers and consumers are doing too. So Tencent has clearly tracking and saw this trend. So we'll give you background, but they've expanded it into for business. And so that's what WeChat Work is taking the same concept, making it official for businesses. And then much more recently, last year in March, they opened up the ability for businesses to connect from the official channel, WeChat Work, to the private channel, private WeChat. And that has changed everything for retail, and we're going to go into that in more detail later. But I think the important point, we're going to reiterate this multiple times today, is that what it's really doing is breaking down the barriers between business and work. And that is going to fundamentally, I think, help transform the way many functions inside of companies are doing business. So that's an overall why we're doing this. Let's jump right into some more details about that and sort of what we view as some of the big reasons for companies to talk about that. And Aurelien is going to take us from here.
Excellent. Thank you, Aaron. So let's have a quick overview at the China landscape at the moment. What we have seen in the last 2 years is that the competition has increased tremendously, and it's going to increase a lot in the next 2-3 years. There are a lot of international brands that are not, present on the Chinese market. And for instance, like if you take the example of Tmall Global, in the next 3 years, the numbers of brands that you have there is going to double. So you see that the competition is going to increase. And one of the key challenges as well is that brands do not really have data about their user. When shoppers are going on, like the JD or the Tmall, those platforms are not necessarily sharing data with them. So the issue is that competition is growing, and then they see that they don't have like a proper foundation because they don't necessarily have data about their user, and they don't necessarily have like loyal customer. So this is the current landscape, and this is why like WeChat Work is going to play like a big role into what we're going to talk about today. So for years, the traditional funnel has been like media buying, KOL, or awareness platforms driving traffic to like the big marketplaces that represents about 90% of everything that is happening in terms of e-commerce. And then there was a purchase. And then if brands wanted to retarget, those kind of customer, they needed to go through those platforms, spending a lot more money in order to, like go back and having like a proper loop on that funnel. So first of all, we're going to have, before we dig into the strategy and why WeChat Work is basically an amazing tool, we're going to start, like rescreening the different functionalities and the basic function and user interfaces of WeChat Work. So WeChat has been developed over the last couple of years, and it's an ecosystem that is basically the number one chat. And one of the reasons why it's so powerful, it's an open ecosystem. So brands have the possibility to have mini program, there is ad, there is official account, there is WeChat Pay, and like the tool like WeChat Work that Aaron was talking about earlier is something that has been developed over the last 2 years, and that is like growing very fast. And one of the key things is that this WeChat Work is now basically connected to WeChat, and this is where like that's creating a huge asset for brands. So
yeah, I think one kind of side point on that is that the Tencent WeChat Work team, they like to talk a lot about a concept called 全员营销, which is complete team sales, which that's a classic bad Chinese translation. But it's what complete team sales is that we are allowing that you get not just your salespeople to sell, but particularly for sort of mid-price retail brands, you can have your entire team sell. So your marketing team can also be recommending products to their friends who can then buy it, and they can, through WeChat Work, they've got payment functionality so that they can actually get a commission to not just your sales team, but to everyone. So what's really cool about that and interesting is that we can break down the barriers between internal and external and start to leverage similar concepts and a functionality to expand the scope of how we improve operations and then how we improve our sales.
So going deeper into what Aaron is saying, basically think about like if you are in the West, if you're in the US, you get Slack. Slack is an internal communication tool that has a lot of extension and opportunity to connect with a lot of third-party tool. And this is how like WeChat Work started. But then afterwards, like it kind of opened up, and it's like if you had Slack with the opportunity to directly talk to people on WhatsApp or on Facebook Messenger. And what's amazing here is that WeChat Work is connected with WeChat, which is like the most used communication tool in China. So when you combine those two together, it's really creating a winner. So this is why WeChat Work is so powerful, because you do not disrupt the habits of the users. You're a brand and you're not asking users to download another app in order to be able to interconnect and to interact with your sales team or the people within your team. So this is where like it's creating a huge advantage compared like to a Slack, for instance. So let's have a look at the user interface. So we see that the user interface is extremely similar. So as WeChat is mainly for chatting with friends and family, but WeChat Works is to talk more like with prospects, with customers and colleagues. Let's have a look at a few key figures. So in 2017, 80% of like companies and people within companies were basically performing professional tasks on WeChat. I'm pretty sure if we look at 2019, it's going to be like 95%. So it's like a huge increase. Like it's hard to have a limit like between professional and personal life. And I think like that's one of the reasons of the existence of WeChat Work. The numbers of registered company on WeChat Work has grown by 180% since 2017. And the top 5 industries using WeChat Work are the technology industry by almost 20%, that represent almost 20% of the total amount, retail 15%, manufacturing 11%, and then education and real estate. And then we can see, like those trends are going to continue growing. And there's about 30 million active users as for today on WeChat Work. It's like five times more than what it was in 2017. And a third of those users are coming from Beijing, Shanghai, Shenzhen, Guangzhou, and Chengdu. So let's have a look at the 4 screens of WeChat Work, the 4 interfaces. So on the left side, we have basically the messages, and the messages looks extremely similar as what you can see on WeChat. The second screen is the contact part. So again, very similar, except that you have like your different groups that are here. The third one is the workspace. So the workspace is basically any given tool, any given app, third party that is basically interconnected with your company account. And you have the opportunity through a single sign-on to log in directly to those external platforms. And the last one is basically your profile. So on your profile, you have the opportunity to see everything related to your company. You have your calendar, you have your favorite, your red packet. So it's an opportunity as well to access your settings. So from an admin standpoint, what is like amazing about WeChat Work is basically you can create different, like groups of users and allocate each of those users to a specific group. So basically, if you're a company with 1,000 people, you can really separate like the marketing part, the business development parts, and then setting up like very specific user rule for each of them. And you can see this on the third screen. And then on the fourth screen, you see that you have the opportunity to very easily add and delete specific user. So what Aaron was mentioning earlier is the opportunity for people in the company for potentially anybody in the company, from your HR to your salespeople, to add and to connect with customer. And so this is a functionality that can be enabled. If you look at the first screen on the top right, you can basically make sure that people in your company can add or not customers. And then on the second screen, you see all the sets of rules that are able, that the admin is able to use. On the third one, you see that you can directly share, like the business QR code to a WeChat user, and then we can see later on that we're not only able to share QR code, but messages, like specific ways, like chat bots and a lot of other things. On the fourth screen, you see that customer, they have the opportunity to also make sure that this vendor, his salesperson is official. So that's from, like the user of like the WeChat account. So they have the opportunity to see what is exactly the profile of that specific user, which company is working for, and having the opportunity to ensure that the transaction or whatever, is being displayed is like under the umbrella of like a specific company and corporation. And the last screen that we see here is basically a watermark protection. So if one of your salespeople want to, like share a specific, like conversation and is taking a screenshot, basically this watermark is going to indicate the name of your company as well as like the name of that particular employee. So this is here to really diminish like the risk of people leaking information and taking screenshot to share it at different places.
Yeah, we're going to hear throughout a lot of the strategies that we're going to talk about later. Control is a key theme that we're going to see again and again, because even though because it's also, for a lot of brands, it's scary to open up the possibility for internal people to be talking directly to customers, so that there is, even though it's possible, you don't, of course, have to do it. And it's totally controllable through a lot of these settings to decide who can share what. Yeah. And then they're trying to help ways to make it, you get a little bit better control of what can be shared and identify who shared it.
Yeah, because in a way they're talking like on behalf of the brand.
Exactly. Yeah.
So that's one of the challenge that needs to be addressed here. So that's one of the fear that needs to be addressed. So let's have a look at why this is useful for salespeople. So on the left side, you can see that you can directly add contacts from your own group of WeChat contacts. So this is very useful. And on the second screen, you see that you have the opportunity directly, when you're selecting your profile, to add very specific tags for very specific users. So like those tags can be predefined and determined by, like the admin or the sales team, and they can be allocated the way needed. On the third slide, you can see that you can use quick replies directly in a chat. Chatbots as well are possible to be set, and you can broadcast different messages to specific group of users. And on the last one, you can see that, and this is a functionality that we're going to talk about at a later stage. So, and this is, I think, one of the most important one here. We all know that there is always turnover, like we have in very dynamic markets, and you want to make sure that whenever like one of your sales team member is leaving, that their clients can actually be reallocated to another sales team member. So that's one of the important functionality here that we're gonna dig a little bit deeper in the future. So in this part 2, we're going to review the 3 WeChat Work strategies for retail. So there is 3 different aspects that we need to address today. Is for brands, how to acquire and connect with their customer in an efficient way. The second point, where Aaron is going to take the lead, is basically having a full team doing social selling. Not only, like maybe your sales team, but like your entire organization at some point. And the third one is going to be about clienteling and how to provide an amazing customer experience throughout the lifetime of this customer. So the first part is acquire customer, connecting with them, but the most important is doing it in an official way. So let's go back to basically our, like funnels that we saw earlier on. If you see the one on the left side, as we mentioned, for years being KOL, marketplaces, purchase, and what companies have been trying to do, sometime in a successful way and sometime in an unsuccessful way, is basically, like to encourage, like QR code in packages for users to start, like using the WeChat account, and then through, marketing automation, social CRM, trying to push some content and retarget them in order to create that private traffic loyalty loop. So that's the first one. But what we were missing here is really the opportunity to connect in the retail, basically in the physical world. And so if you look at a funnel on the right side, it's basically like trying to drive potentially traffic in store and facilitate a purchase, but at the same time is having your sales team on site, like physically interacting with your customer and trying their best to encourage, scanning a QR code and like setting up this interaction on WeChat Work. Once this interaction is set, then you can connect, like to your salesperson, you can connect to your social CRM, and this is where you can create that loyalty loop that we're going to talk about in a little bit. So the current challenges, the current problems is that basically there's no visibility or control for like that customer relationship. So it comes from both sides, from the brands, they don't necessarily know what their sales team is doing, but also sometimes from directly the sales team, because like they might send you a link, or they might send you a coupon like for you to buy on site or like to buy online. But if those sales team, like they don't have the opportunity to see if this was successful, like right on the spot, then they might feel discouraged. So when the second one is that whenever like a sales rep is leaving, then you lose, like for a brand, they lose all the effort that have been put by this sales rep for, like that couple of months or that couple of years. And so this is money wasted. This is money lost. The third one is salespeople can look unofficial. So if you know like a person really well, then it's okay. But sometimes you might, like not feel like 100% safe, like buying or giving like some, like private information, because you don't know how they may be used. The fact that you are connecting to somebody using WeChat Work is something that is going to help on that particular aspect. And missing half of the picture, which means, like salespeople in the retail world, they're going to connect to like 10, depending on like which industry you're in, but from like 5 people all the way like to maybe 50 people, 100 people every day. So if they don't have like the right tool to track, like the habit, or track if this person is already like a user of a customer of your brand, if they don't know, what are the tastes, then we're losing, like a big opportunity here. And the last one is that we cannot send personalized communication at that moment. So how this is providing, like WeChat Work is, like providing some key solution here. Doing the following: it's providing more control of a relationship with the customer. It's establishing an official channel of communication between brand and customer, not only between the salesperson and the customer. And it's helping to reassign sales rep once they leave. And once the last one is basically segmenting an audience to send very personal message. So how do you create the connection? So there's two ways. Like QR code in WeChat have been like always here. So, the sales rep can scan the customer, or the customer can scan the sales rep. That's the first thing. That's very easy. It's working, like immediately, just after the acceptance. And the second one is basically you have the opportunity to just enter the WeChat ID of that customer. The only thing is that it's not going to send like an official like invitation, like if it was a contact. It's just going to send you a notification in the notification center. So you'll have to click on it in order to go and accept it. So that's the first step. But once you connect with that customer, the great thing is that you can bind it. I mean, like automatically it's going to be binded with your CRM. So once this is in your CRM, then like the great thing for the sales rep is that if, especially if this client is already a user of your brand, they're going to be able to pull some information such as, whatever they bought, like their taste. And if a proper segmentation and allocation of tags has been done, then it's going to help that sales rep tremendously. Like including, like maybe birthday and all those details. So Having all of those is something that helps kickstarting, like the conversation in a good direction. And right away, like the sales rep, whenever they're getting this information, if there is no information about that specific client, their goal is to enrich that customer profile in order for them to remember next time they connect with them that those were the tastes, and like this is like the kind of product that should be pushed. And by doing this, basically brands are getting information about their customer, and they can retarget them either through like WeChat Work, but also through WeChat, and having like segmentation of like the push that they're going to do for that specific user type. So let's talk about this example with like a big FMCG brand doing baby, kids, and maternity. They have a sales force on site, and what they saw is that like one of the biggest challenge is those sales team can lose a little bit like their drive like after several weeks, for a specific reason is that they're not getting like right away like constant feedback. So when you have a sales team, when you have sales rep, one of the most important thing is to give like constant feedback for them to be able to really drive their sales strategy, to adapt their key messages. So by using WeChat Work and using like a full like omni-channel and linking all ecosystems together, this brand has been able to give very specific KPIs in real time in order for each of the sales rep to understand how they are performing. So by doing this, this has like increased a lot, like the drive basically of the sales team, but also helped increase sales big time. For this second example, what this brand working in personal care has done is that they saw that even though they were working with WeChat Work, like sending very specific, sending very like general pushes to all their clients was not really working. So because those clients, they felt that the push was not really personalized to them. And so like what they started to do is segmenting, like having a better segmentation of their user database. Once the segmentation is done, each of the sales rep had the opportunity to push the right content to each of those segmented customer. And what is done, basically the opening rates has grown, the revenue has grown. And in order to really materialize and see this brand has done like a customer recruitment ranking that is somehow encouraging as well, like both sales rep to sell more, but as well to encourage them to do a better segmentation of those customers. So this has been extremely useful. Retain and reassign customer whenever like you have one of your salesperson that is leaving. So we all know that like creating the relationship, having like customer is something that can take a long time, and sometimes like key clients will really create like strong relationship with like your sales rep. And whenever this sales rep is leaving, like it can be like scary. Maybe like this client is going to follow this sales rep maybe with the other brand. And so what like this specific American skincare brand has been doing is really setting up like a strategy, first of all, like to segment each of those key clients. And whenever like key clients from that brand their sales rep was leaving, was to enable and like ensure that each of those key clients was going to be like reassigned as fast as possible and retargeted as soon as possible. So you want to make sure here that whoever is bringing you the most revenue, you're retargeting them like with a high priority in order to make sure that they're gonna like retain those customers. So that's been like a very successful process. So key takeaways here, basically value for the company. Like right now, it's been like proven that like this is a very cost-effective way to acquire and retain high-quality prospects and leads, and it's improving overall like the customer insight and control that you can have. For the salespeople, it's great. It's giving them like a boost in terms of drive. It really helps them to give like direct feedback so they can adapt their key messaging depending on the types of clients they're talking to. And in terms of value for the customer, it's a really good value because they really have like the opportunity to have like a personal VIP approach most of the time, and they can get better discount, and then they can really feel that like brands are considering them and giving them like a VIP tailor-made services. So that's all for part number one. For part number two, Aaron is going to take the lead again. So we're going to talk about social selling and how efficiently engage and convert people.
Yeah, thanks, Aurelien. So some of the things you said I think are important, particularly about the efficiency, about acquisition, because actually all the other two strategies, social selling and clienteling, require the first acquisition, that first step. So they all need to do that. But one of the things that we've seen from the customers we're working with who have really been able to efficiently put this in place is that this is really the realization of a true cross-team digitalization initiative, because you now have the marketing team, instead of the marketing team spending its media budget to acquire its fans, where the operations or retail team doesn't care about that. Putting these two together is leading to really efficient acquisition. So all the brands that we work with that have the fastest growth of their WeChat accounts all are doing offline acquisition strategies of different types, and WeChat Work makes that even more efficient. So jumping to social selling, what this is fundamentally we've got a couple issues that have come up. Number one, sales teams are already doing it. Sales teams are entrepreneurial. Even though we don't have an official channel to sell online, their best customers it's raining, they're not going to come to the store, they need the product, they'll just WeChat them and say, hey, buy this and send it to me. And so the sales team's doing it already. It's not official, it's a sort of it's difficult for the sales team because then they have to call QID, send it out themselves, track it. If there's any issue, they have to follow up with themselves, and it's not really official. So it's already happening. The reason it's happening, the reason there's a big opportunity, I like to sum it up in this way, is that water flows downhill. Okay? People come into the store, they were really excited to get this experience of the store, but if they're a brand fan or they like the product, they will want to continue to buy it. But if it's too much trouble, they'll probably buy something that's a little bit easier. So for the sales team, social selling allows them to more provide convenience, so they can continue this relationship. And that relationship is really valuable because, as we know from all the different ways social selling is, and KOLs are empowering sales. I mean, we've seen examples of a KOL selling millions in a couple of hours over social. And because the reality is that we're all spending about 65% of our time, 3.9 hours a day on mobile, 65% on social networks. And if we're talking with a trusted person who's recommending it, our conversion rate is 16 times higher. And we see that from the data of our customers who are doing this, that the conversion rate really is that much higher. And so we're solving really three key pain points about this is, the unofficial selling, customer inconvenience, and then really missed opportunities. Because if we continue that connection from offline to online, there's better opportunities to sell. So how does it work? Let's get into that. There's really 4 steps here you can see in the screen. The first step, we talked about acquisition. You have to connect with the customer first. And then the second key component is content, because you have to send them something for them to look at. So this is where some development is going to come in, because you need a mini program or a website or a product website or a content website so that you give the sales team weapons for them to use. So that, once you have that, then you've connected. You also need to know who to use the weapon on. So that comes from that identification and insight piece, where I need to connect to the customer, connect them to the other records of the CRM or the e-commerce, so that I know who this is, who am I talking to. And then finally, again, like the example that Aurelien shared with us about the KPI dashboard. This is, again, a big theme through all of this. If you don't provide timely, almost real-time incentivization and visibility of that, if you don't gamify it for sales teams or provide serious incentives, it just won't happen. They have to know what they're doing is actually resulting in commissions, to be clear. So let's look at a case of this. The first one we're talking about is an insight example. So this is a shopping mall. The problem is that they were using salespeople didn't know customers who the customer was. So they could talk to them, they've connected with them, but then they didn't really remember who the customer was. So they didn't know what content to send to them. So they completed the connection to give the salesperson a profile, and then give them the 360-degree insight into the customer actions on other channels. And then they were able to significantly increase the conversion rate just by the fact that the salesperson now remembered who the person was and could recommend more personalized products. So this is, in essence, we know that across any channel, personalization works. Amazon has basically built all of its business on this single concept. So that's a good way to use insight. The second example we have is talking about, again, that incentive feedback loop. Because if the sales team is sending things out, but they don't know what's happening, or even worse, they actually don't get a commission, they won't do it. So this example is a skincare brand where previously the salespeople had to prepare their own content and then they had to manually place the order. So they replaced that process with the process we had discussed earlier on the how-to section, so that they were able to share a mini program card directly with their customer. The customer could place the order, and then the salespeople would immediately see that feedback loop and see the commission they had earned from recommending that product. So that significantly shifted the sales team's perspective and about how that worked, and significantly increased revenues for that brand. The third example we've got here is about timing. So we cannot just increase revenue from our sales team online by recommending things. It also is about the conversion rate. How much do people actually are they going to go ahead and buy it? And that has a lot to do with timing, because even though our brand is very important, it's not at top of mind all the time. And people have to be ready to buy. They have to have this intent to buy, and then they're much more willing to buy. So this is where our marketing team and the marketing and sales team collaboration really starts to take off and go to a new level. It's because this example is where the marketing team is activating the customer via online channels. But then through behavioral tracking, we're tracking that customer when they're engaged, and then we're notifying and letting the sales team know this customer is active, this is a high-level customer, and we're letting them know what they're interested in. So again, the combination of insight, the sales team knows what they're interested in, and more importantly, knows when, so that they can, of course, in a non-creepy way, reach out to the customer, make a recommendation, or ask them if they need any support. And so and I just want to emphasize that notification piece is also really important. That notification piece is also really important because if you don't, what we've seen launching these programs with customers is that asking a salesperson to use WeChat Work is already a big leap of their understanding, because it's a new app, and even though it's almost exactly like WeChat, it's a different app. And so that jump is tough for them to make. And if on top of that, you ask them to use a specific mini program and do other things inside of it, that's going to be even more difficult. So as much as possible, we believe in leveraging supplementing the native functionality. So a notification is something everyone understands. There's a red dot. I need to open it. And then they can click from that into the mini program, then take the action that's need to be taken. And that's much more effective, because we also, from providing the solution, we have to make it super easy for our sales team, or else they won't do it. So summing up, our social selling takeaways. We've got value to the brand, of course, it's an additional revenue channel, growing an additional 10 to 15% revenue out of your existing salespeople. That's actually massive for a lot of brands. And plus, we are protecting our brand image and making sure that the sales team is sharing. They're not taking pictures of products, but they're actually sharing images of our products that we spent millions of dollars creating marketing assets for. Value to salespeople, it's actually good for them too. They're already selling online, it's a pain. We can make it easy for them to do that. And then also we can make it very easy for them to expand the number of people that they're selling online by giving them reminders and notifications for when a customer is ready to engage with them. Finally,
that means also you can have like a better retention of your sales team. You know, like if you incentivize them better in real time, like then they will not want to go necessarily, you know, to the competition. So like they will stick with you. So I think this is a great, you know, a great incentive for them.
Yeah, but that's a really good point. And one of the insights that we've seen is that the sales team, it takes them a while. As anybody who's done retail operations knows, to launch any new initiative is a fairly slow process.
Yeah.
And so you need to give them quick wins and to get them started going for it. But indeed, the salespeople we've seen who have really adopted it well, love it because they figured out, wait a minute, I can just sit around and send messages and I can make significantly more money than before. So, and then of course the customers, the value is that they have a trusted shopping experience with a salesperson they have a relationship with, and it makes things easier for them to get the product they need at the right time. Next, we're going to go into clienteling, which is the third strategy here. Clienteling is basically it's that connection with the CRM system to particularly for brands who have really high value items where that one-to-one connection with a salesperson really matters, or they have very high lifetime value, or it's a long sales cycle. These type of customers care about clienteling, which is giving the sales team deep insight into who that customer is, and giving also the reverse direction, allowing the sales team to record into the CRM, the customer relationship management system, about information about this customer. This is something that's actually been going on for a very long time. The example I like to use is the Savoy Hotel, which was founded in 1889, and they've had a system for about 80 years where they used index cards to record all the information about their customers so they could provide 5-star service. That system is basically actually what we're doing now, except we've now added in the ability to track behavioral data on our customers. So a lot of global brands are already doing this, and they have global solutions for this clienteling tools, particularly in luxury. But when it comes to China, it's different because a lot of these solutions are built around email, and email doesn't really work very well in China. So WeChat Work makes it seamless now so that the tool is seamlessly integrated with the communication channel. And with some of the advances in what WeChat Work doing, is we're going to see in a little bit, particularly for group messaging, we can take clienteling to the next level and make the sales team even easier. So what is WeChat Work what does a clienteling solution look like? So first of all, it has a number of components that are similar. I'm going to go through those in a minute. But again, the main thing about why we want to switch to doing it inside of WeChat Work is just easy. It's the way our sales team can best communicate with our customers, and then to embed the tool directly inside of WeChat Work makes it so that it can become seamless for the salesperson and also seamless for the consumer. Additionally, on an operational level, one of the benefits is that we can connect the insights into what the salesperson is doing, who they're talking to with, because formerly, if they're using personal WeChat, we have zero visibility into how much has been done. But now we get significantly more visibility into what a salesperson can do. So what does it look like? So there's really A key couple of steps around clienteling. Again, acquisition piece, you need that connection piece. You need to get connected with the customer, and then that identification, the connection with the CRM. This is kind of the star of the show because we get deep insights into who the customer is, and most importantly, what they've purchased in the past. We've seen salespeople who can, within 2 seconds, glancing through a pre-purchase history, can tell you exactly what is the strategy I need to take with that customer in order to get them to the next sale. Salespeople, or at least the best salespeople, are really good at that. But for the sort of average salespeople or the salespeople who you're coaching or growing, you need tasks. And that's the other key component is tasks, because we're going to help them to remember, because they have a lot of customers. A couple of years from now, they'll have thousands of customers inside of Connected. Who to talk to when is super critical. And so the task is going to make that easy for the salesperson, because we're going to remind them it's Aurelien's birthday today, so that they know to reach out to them. And then once we've reached out, we have to give them the content, the messaging for how we can do this easily. One of the great things about WeChat Work is that they have this group messaging feature, and they've taken it to another level, which we'll talk about in a bit, which is called the company level or group messaging, so that we can automate some of this and make it even easier for our sales team. So the first example is about a consumer connection example about making our sales response more efficient. And this is actually a little bit of a, so this is an auto industry example where previously the customer would have to dial into a customer service line, and then they'd have to wait for customer service agents to engage with them, and the customer service agent didn't really understand the product well enough, so then they'd have to route it again. So what they put in place is the ability for the sales team to follow an official account, and then, or not the customer to follow the official account, and then be directly routed to a direct sales consultant, not the customer service team, directly to a salesperson inside of WeChat Work. And so then they could communicate with the customer, and that allowed them to cut the wait time for the customer, and then it also allowed the customer to get a much better experience because they're talking to someone who can really answer the questions. And so this resulted in more efficient communication and increased levels of conversion. The second example that I'm going to give is one which talks a little bit about sort of the leading edge of what's happening in terms of improving conversion. And so this example uses that called company messaging. So once you've done the connection, you've bound the customer, they're following him, then we're assigning the customer clienteling tasks to follow up, say, just made a purchase, a 2-week follow-up. But then there's certain types of tasks that our sales team does not need to be fully personalized with. So they can just perhaps share a product. It doesn't have to be personalized down to the level of that exact customer. So that's what we're calling broadcast type of tasks. And an example of that might be that follow-up after we have a new campaign, a new product launch. I'm going to send this, say, the bags. We have a new bag in this season. I'm going to send that to my customers who are really interested in bags. Now, I don't necessarily have to know that much about them. I can just say, hey, we've got this great new bag out. Here's a great picture of this bag. And that doesn't have to be totally personalized. So we can leverage this company broadcast messaging. So how it works is the sales team can do that segmentation using the CRM data and behavioral data, and then assign this message, this group message, to a salesperson. And all they have to do is push one button, and they can go out to the potentially hundreds of customers they have who are bag lovers. And from the customer's perspective, it looks exactly like the fourth screen, is that our salesperson sent me a message and they sent me an image. And to them, to this customer's perspective, this is a personalized engagement. And so they're going to look at this. The open rates for this are significantly higher than if it was coming through the official channel. So this is, I think, the really groundbreaking engagement. that clienteling can lift it, can do the typical clienteling things, and then move it even further into making the salesperson's life even easier. So to summarize, clienteling, number one, value to the company. We get the official process, better customer experiences through tasks. We're starting to get more insight. We understand better who our sales team is engaging with and at what levels. The salesperson is getting timely reminders to more efficiently engage with the right people at the right time, and then making it potentially even easier for them with sort of one button click messaging to multiple customers. Finally, from the customer perspective, it's about experience. They're getting personalized care from a salesperson they already trust. So that's our third example. We're almost out of time here. We have about 10 minutes left, so I'm going to quickly go through this part 3 about how to get this, and then we'll open it up for Q&A. So how to get started. When we're talking with brands about this, there's always a question of, is it right for me? Is it the right time for me? And really, you always have to answer about what's the value for this. So you need to do some analysis on this. There's definitely some challenges with this, particularly for retail. WeChat Work is still a developing platform. Things are changing all the time. In fact, on Monday, there's a big announcement coming out. There's a big, WeChat Work is releasing some of their new initiatives for next year. We believe that they're going to be talking about supporting moments from WeChat Work. So we'll give you an update, send you an update on what happened after we hear the news on Monday. We're hoping for that because that's one of the big barriers right now, because salespeople use moments a lot. So how are we going to help that? So then, and additionally, organizationally, it's very challenging because we have to get multiple teams to cooperate. So if we're the CRM team leading this initiative or the marketing team, then we have to get buy-in from the sales team. So that's always a challenge. And then operationally, once you get buy-in from the management level, you have to get trained and roll this out. And so all of these things are challenging, but as we are seeing from some of the leading brands, it can be done. The solutions, so the solution approach, actually it's quite easy to roll out an MVP in terms of IT and investment, because as we talked about in the first section, there's a lot of tools that are already there out of the box. You don't need to do any development. It's just more of an operational rolling them out and getting people started to use them. What is that? A 6-step guide to quickly get a project like this launched. Definitely, number one, talk to all your key stakeholders. Definitely go talk to salespeople, talk to your sales leaders, all of this, to figure out if they're willing and if they get excited about it. Number two, assess the tools that they're using now. What's your current state of your CRM? How is it using? And then figure out the gaps. Based upon some of these strategies, what can we provide to them? What can we get them excited about to start to do something new? And definitely always, step number 4, run a pilot. Never, this is somewhat goes without saying, but don't start with all of your stores. Pick a couple stores who are really supportive, and then go from there after showing, number 5, some feedback, the results, and then you can communicate the results and move on to the next step. In terms of implementation times and phasing, definitely we have the standard. We've got some preparation where we need to actually, if your organization doesn't already use WeChat Work, you need to get that buy-in to get onboard your company to WeChat Work. And then you can begin setting up people's accounts, inviting employees to start accessing the app, and then they can start actually using it. So if we don't do any specific custom engagement, then that could happen really within a couple of weeks. You could get a very, very beginning MVP started, or a minimum viable product. But then you can take it, if you're going to do some of the clienteling, some of the more sophisticated insights or social selling. This, of course, requires a significant investment of time, because you have to deal with the IT team and also third-party vendors in order to build the tools that you're going to need in order to do these things. So that then extends the process to weeks to many months to, yeah. So That gives you an idea about sort of implementation, and then maybe Aurelien, just um, take us home.
Yeah. Well, I mean, thank you so much, Aaron. We're gonna, like go through each of the question in a little bit, but to 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 finish on this, so what we see is that WeChat Work can really act like a bridge between, like sales rep, brands, and overall like their key clients, to break, like this, like existing sales funnel that is not helping, brands at the moment. So brands are looking, like for some new strategy, and WeChat Work, the implementation of like WeChat Work is going to be key for like the full omni-channel strategy that brands are putting in place right now. Omni-channel, you're talking about O2O, be the keyword like 3-4 years ago. Omni-channel has been the keyword like for the last 2 years. So WeChat Work is going to be a very important piece of those omni-channel strategy. So let's, you want to conclude with another word?
Yeah, no, it's I think that again that breaking down and including omni-channel becoming not just for our external facing channels,
Yeah.
but our internal facing channels. I think this is a really important concept because we can really empower and push forward the way we're engaging both with our internal users and our external users. And this is fundamentally, I think, a big paradigm shift that the digital team can help push.
Yeah, I mean, we believe that if executed properly, this can create like a stronger loyalty, raving customer fans, and really like stronger revenues.
Yeah, and stronger and happier employees
And happier
as
employees
well.
as well.
So we have about 5 minutes left here in our time, so let's jump to some questions. Sorry, guys, we talked a little bit longer than we expected. So let's get to, so if you have any questions, please feel free, just type them in, and we will take some of them.
All right, so let's start with the first one. Is WeChat Work for big companies or small ones? I'll start with this one. It's an easy one. You'll get the hard one. So overall, like what we can say is that I think it can be valuable for any size of company. Coming back to what Aaron is saying, it really depends on like what kind of return on investment you're expecting, from this implementation. So like the first step is, like doing this analysis of, like what could like a 15% increase in terms of revenue for each of those clients can make. It really is going to depend as well, like if you have a retail presence or not. So here we're talking really WeChat Work in, like for retail work. But like overall for WeChat, you need to understand, like from, like an HR perspective, it's going to motivate and reduce maybe your turnover for your sales team, and then at the same time increasing your revenue per user. So that's the first question that you need to answer. You can be like a small retail shop, but if, like the value of each customer is really high, then you can see that a small implementation will make a tremendous difference in terms of your revenue. Okay, let's talk about which industry would benefit the most from WeChat Work.
Yeah, well, we'll talk about first within retail, because we think actually, and from the way WeChat Work is being adopted, particularly for office automation purposes, that it's actually useful for just about any industry. So any industry where you need to communicate, which is, well, all industries, it's going to be useful because just private chat is really, really useful. But specifically some of the clienteling and retailing strategies we've talked about. What we're seeing is that there's two kinds of companies, retail companies, that are really jumping on this. Number one is, of course, companies with a lot of stores and a lot of salespeople. Because if they can move an additional 5%, that is a huge amount of growth for them in a year. So we're seeing companies like Watson's on one level who are rolling this out to their promoters, and then they're using more of sort of that acquisition, pushing promotions through those personal connections, in-store personal connections. And then on the other end of the spectrum, we're seeing luxury really jumping on this because there's just that really high individual customer value. So it really comes down to, again, the analysis that Aurelien talked about first, is that your LTV valuation and your initial purchase valuation, and to see if consumer connection really makes sense. Because someone like, for instance, Coca-Cola and big FMCG brands might not really make sense for them because they're much more broader based and their price is much lower.
Okay, so I guess like we need to be fast. What about data security? So we're just talking about it just before that webinar with Aaron. So basically, like WeChat Work and Tencent has like some of the highest standards in terms of like data protection, privacy. So this should not be a concern for any company, right, Aaron?
Yeah, so Tencent WeChat Work they've got all the certifications, SOC2, ISO 27001, they've got MLPS level 2, which is the Chinese data security certification. It's critical. So we know that actually WeChat Work team even has a version for the financial industry that they kind of privately roll out, that will be according to all of the financial regulations in China, security levels. So you don't need to worry about your data security with WeChat Work.
Okay, so Moment is currently missing from WeChat Work. Could group messaging somehow replace Moments?
Partially, yeah. So that's what we talked about earlier. I mean, we're hoping for the best for announcement of Moments next week, but it definitely, in the final analysis, the reality is that what the company sending, this group messaging allows them to do another type. It's still kind of a hard sell because you're one-to-one talking to someone. The good thing about Moments is it's a soft sell, and sales team can be sending out product pictures on almost a daily basis, but the customer doesn't have to respond, doesn't feel rude for not responding. So that's really difficult to replace. But in the balance of, if we're making life so much easier, delivering so much more value to the sales team, in order to achieve that, they'll take the value. And actually, they won't take it, they'll just use both. And that's what we're seeing, is that they'll actually still continue to use both until there's a solution for them to pick one or the other.
Okay, so last question. How can companies best manage sales account, create by store or by person? I guess for that one, like it should be a mix of both. Like having an understanding on like how you can, like segment your sales team, and really like being able to manage them in that way. So whether they're going to be, like arranged by stores or they're going to be, individually managed, I think it's going to depend on, like the size of your sales team and who is going to be, their sales manager. So I guess, like for every configuration, we'll have like basically a different answers, and, like it's going to depend on the hierarchy that you have in your company.
Yeah. Okay. So thank you everyone for tuning in. Sorry we didn't have enough time to answer all the questions we had today. Finally, want to remind everyone that we actually will be able to download the full white paper on retail transformation with WeChat Work, and we'll be sending you the link, right?
Yes.
For how to download that. So thanks again, everybody, and thanks, Aurelien, for joining in here today.
Thanks, Aaron.